You know, it's funny to me because Starbucks is the most anti-American, anti-Christian company that I know of, and I know quite a bit about them, of course. I keep this cup or these cups first of all because of their size and scale, but because it simply reminds me of the living in Seattle in the '90s and living in Seattle in the '90s is a bit. I think I've said this a lot, but it's a little bit like living in Paris in the '20s. If you were there, it was probably one of the greatest times to live in history. Um, and they've ruined Seattle, of course, like they've ruined San Francisco for the same reasons. But at the time, it was beautiful. So it's sort of a daily index of my memory of one of the high points in my life. You just can't. There's just no way to explain it. To some degree, until 10 years ago, the Bellevue Redmond area was still a sort of like a utopian green zone because Microsoft had probably delivered more of its profits to employees than not only any company in history, but all companies in history combined. So it created this wonderful artificial world of populated by a majority of nerds, just like me, and in an environment that was extraordinarily optimistic, and where experimentation and entrepreneurship were reveled in, and until the Seattle managed to do their until Microsoft over immigrated to the area and Seattle managed to pick up on the continuing their leftist slant. It was really a paradise. But like anything, if our people create a haven, it will attract the parasites that will destroy it. In any event, today, that's not the topic I wanted to talk about. Today, I want to talk a little bit about a question somebody asked me, and it's one of my most secret but most valued advisors. And he said, well, Curtis, you're trying to salvage Christianity, but is Christianity solvable? He says, I realize that you're, I understand that if you want to somehow operationalize Christianity, you would have to boil his preaching down to his 5 tenets of love and then strictly circumscribe it to beginning in kindergarten. He's just asking if that's feasible to do today. And I'm like, well, did Aristotle and Epicurus solve empiricism? Well, no, but I mean, they made it get there. Sorry, I didn't throw in Democritus and and the others, but anyway, I usually have this debate with. It's really Epicurus we should be listening to, although Aristotle put it in the Aristotle more addressed the social science part of it. So, no, they didn't solve it, and Jesus didn't solve it either. But as philosophers, they solved serious problems of the time. And so, let's go through this, and we can see the context. The West developed a heroic, entrepreneurial, technological, warfare law, polity, and economy at the cost of natural selection paid by the unfit to compete. That's really where it comes from. It's the economy and polity of pirates, basically, cattle raiders, pirates, Vikings. These are all democratic polities because they have to be. They're entrepreneurial and democratic. Well, the West invented and held on to that system of order first and longest. And so as they conquered, they expanded their economy and demanded labor, slaves, women, peasants, etc. It's an upper class, or at least upper middle class philosophy. Not upper class in the sense of rent-seeking politicians, but upper class in the sense of entrepreneurial or natural aristocracy. And so as they expanded, they demanded labor because their system was working. They invented law. Law is their primary first order, and that forces markets. There's nothing else they can do. There's no way to compete in politics or society except by markets when law, in other words, natural law, is your first premise. So they continued what we would consider pirate or a Viking or steppe raider ethics and morality and law as their primary institution. And honestly, that's where the West's speciality comes from. Is this purely empirical? It doesn't force you like other civilizations had to accommodate the vast numbers of the lower classes. It doesn't do that. It says our job is to evolve and compete, not make use of and parasitically depend upon these lower classes to produce a steady state. So they expanded too rapidly and they exhausted their domestic, human resources, their Aryan capital, and they turned their strength into a weakness by dilution. And this is the problem with the fast expansionary war and conquest model of growth that's been practiced in Europe.
Versus
using the slow defensive technological warfare of growth as practiced in China. Chinese practice total war. They don't think of it as conquering people and then maintaining, trying to build a social order out of them, letting them stay independent. Chinese conduct total war, which means full integration into the Han ethnic model. So the problem of enfranchising, as in Europe, is different from the problem of indoctrinating, like China. Both models are possible as long as one doesn't exhaust the original human capital. In other words, the rate of expansion is limited to the equilibrium between the aristocracy and their kin and the aliens. So my argument is that Jesus discovered the cheapest possible solution to solving the problem of being subject to the European discovered laws of the universe, including natural selection, which has frankly selected them for removal by the process of extending kinship love. The consequence of rapid evolution, meaning European Aryans, exposing natural selection, meaning underclasses, especially among the South Asians who are all in the 80s, generated demand for tragedy among heterogeneous peoples, just as it did for the Greeks, the tragedy among homogeneous people. Which is why I argue that the Jews merely copied the Bible of the West, the epic cycle, and in particular, the tragic hero of the aristocracy, Achilles, by combining South Eurasian, meaning low IQ, ancient mythos, largely Horace et al., into a tragic figure of Jesus that was virtuous for suffering the tragedy at the bottom, just as Achilles was virtuous for suffering the tragedy of being a ruler. And this is confirming that the Middle East never invents anything. They just copy it by converting it into some sort of lie or another. So again, I work by searching for first causes, what we consider first principles, and man's history of innovation and adaptation by the satisfaction of demand. In other words, I see people as reactive agents discovering ways to adapt, not particularly revolutionary, seeing things ahead of demand. So my purpose is to destroy the system of lying and its lies, even if those lies are entrenched and millions or billions are addicted to those lies. Because if there is or are gods, meaning the universe, and they speak to us at all, meaning the laws of the universe, and they have any plan for us at all, meaning evolution into some hands of gods ourselves, then only Europeans have identified gods, discovered their words, and applied them into transcending man for them. Everyone else, frankly, failed except the Chinese, who merely stagnated. The Jews chose the devils, his lies, the strategy of women, stagnation. The Europeans chose the gods, truth, and the strategy of men, evolution. And the only struggle other than that is the slow Chinese or the fast European method, or the failure of the Semites and their lies. My objective is to outlaw the lies of the Semites without outlawing the gains of extension of kinship love to kith, but not enemies. In this way, we can preserve the original insight of Jesus, satisfy the devoted that they were not entirely wrong and they were right in some way, yet end the Semitic system of lying forever. Some people's specialty is to try to fight theological fire from a position of political weakness, fighting theological fire with theological fire. And mine is to fight theological fire with scientific and legal halon from a position of political strength. So my mission is to obtain the political power necessary to prohibit lying. So instead of bribing people with false promises and lies, in other words, fighting theological fire with theological fire, I want to pay people with an end to this conflict, to the restoration of our self-determination, regardless if you're left or on the right or in the center. I want to propose economic reforms that end parasitism upon them by anyone and restore them in exposing and defunding the enemy from every dimension. That requires a method of mandating a dialogue that only a threat seems possible to bring into being. And the right is a bunch of, frankly, ignorant, overconfident, clown world man-boys lacking any possible empirical elite and being crushed by the world's better elite at parasitism. So the question is whether A, the fast method, that power is obtainable by the, given the clown world of the right, B, the medium method, that the sale can be made at political pace, or C, the slow method, that we require a new religion because that damn sophistry is all the nitwits can handle without elites in power to boss them around. So is Christianity salvageable? Well, it depends on the fundamentalists, who are addicts, the traditionalists who only seek solutions, and the intellectuals who will tolerate, and they probably won't tolerate, any form of persisting superstition. How do we bring that together? The natural religion that for all people, in other words, the non-false religion, is debt payment to ancestors, heroes, nature, and the universe, and celebration of our struggle to defeat that universe, despite its hostility to us and all advanced life. So again, our ancient religion was heroic and evolutionary at the cost of the underclasses. Christianity was submissive and devolutionary at the cost of self-defense, innovation, and evolution. The optimum admixture is simply reformation of our ancient religions, the heathen, nature, pagan, ancestor, hero, and Christian care for the unfit, in exchange for their constraint on the reproduction. We can do that. It's not a false religion. But the left can't tolerate it because they're unfit. That's what it means to be a leftist, to declare that you're unfit for the competition or unwilling to pay the cost of the competition in order to preserve the gains of Western civilization and the facing of the laws of the universe regardless of cost. So is it possible? I don't know. I just know that if you start with the truth and you keep banging away on it long enough, you come up with better answers than the people who start with lies and then try to spread them. This is Kurt Doolittle for the Propertarian Institute. Thank you for listening.